Just a really quick announcement before the show begins. IFP is hosting a special live taping of Back to One on May 31st at 7 p.m. at the Made in New York Media Center in Brooklyn. My guest will be the amazing young actor Christopher Abbott, star of the new Hulu limited series Catch 22. Tickets are $10, $5 for IFP members. Click on the link in the description for more info or go to ifp.org. If you're in New York on May 31st, come out to this special event. It's going to be a good time.
By the time I finished Fringe, I mean, it had really, in a lot of ways, it had destroyed my work ethic. It had destroyed my self-confidence. It took me about a year to get all that back. Something interesting happened, though. There's something about the way that I approach my work that's looser. The other thing I started to realize is that I needed to let go of the fear of forgetting my lines. Whatever time I had, just map out a plan and just make sure I did the plan, and then just trust that my subconscious would do the rest.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Lance Reddick is an actor. He sat down with me in New York City to talk about the work.
Is there a typical way that you begin the process of inhabiting a role?
It depends on the role, and it depends on the time I have. I mean, for me, it almost always just starts with the words. Even if I don't have a lot of time, I tend to want to read the whole script first, because, and this goes all the way back to my first year training at drama school. Because all we did was study Chekhov my first semester in drama school. And it was all about learning how to uncover subtext and how to play actions. And how, in drama school, how playing an action was defined, when I went to school, how playing an action was defined was how you trying to make the other person feel to get what you want. So first, just the kind of understanding the world, and you can find out so much about a character by what other people say about them, which is part of the reason why it's so important to read the whole script.
Right.
Particularly if you talk about a play or a film. And so then the next thing is just trying to get the rhythm of, then I just start trying to learn the words. If there's an accent involved too, often I'll start with the accent, just so that I can start learning the words in the accent. Because trying to learn the words just the way that I talk, and not, so trying to find the rhythm of the way a person speaks. So for Charon, I didn't have a lot of time, because I had less than a week between the time I was cast and the time I ended up going to shoot my stuff. And so, and that's an interesting character in that first film, because he's such a strong presence, but he's not actually in the film that much. So it wasn't that I had a lot of lines to learn, but I wanted to get the accent right. And I also felt that I needed to, because usually in terms of just trying to get a feel for a character, usually it's just kind of going over and over again, and then things will kind of, as I rehearse it with myself, things will kind of start coming to me. But for that one, I felt like I needed a shortcut, so I tried to think of other specific people or other characters that I'd seen that kind of embodied the spirit of the guy that I'm trying to do. And so with Charon, I just thought about it, and just kind of from my subconscious, what popped in my mind was Hector Elizondo in Pretty Woman.
Oh yeah.
So I just thought about that quintessential upscale servant.
Right. And
the other thing was having a sense of danger about him, because he inhabits this world of assassins. So one of the things that I'm using this as Charon as a specific example, but one of the things that, and I'd thought about this before, which is good, but one of the things that Chad said to me when I first got on set in the first film was, you want to get the sense that as I don't know that he used these words, but basically as sophisticated and genteel as Charon is, you want to get the sense that if something went down, he'd be reaching for the shotgun under the table to handle his stuff. So that's just one example.
But this brings up a good point about not having enough time. and having to go to that shortcut that you did to get right there.
Yeah.
You know, like people might panic, other actors that might even, some people might even be listening.
Well, part of that is experience. Over the
Yeah.
years, I've learned that it just doesn't pay to panic. It's really interesting. My process, you know, I used to really, and sometimes I still do, but I used to really envy people who have kind of, who are very, very quick studies, because I'm not when it comes to learning lines. It's funny because I've, ever since The Wire, I've tended to play authority figures who talk a lot, so have big speeches, often exposition. So, but you know, it's a really interesting thing. My process has always been one of inculcation, just like going over it over and over and over again. Early on, when I first became an actor, when I first started acting professionally, before I went to I started acting. I really started pursuing acting 2 years before I went to drama school, and I did a play called The Boys Next Door. In learning that script, there were a lot of sequences that were had several characters and a lot of dialogue, and each character would only say one word, like one line, you know, and the dialogue would go fast. So it would be really the word that comes to my mind is stickamific. So in order to learn it, so that I could really play it, I literally just recorded the entire scene, and I tried to basically do all the different voices, so that I could practice it listening with the timing, so that it reached the point where I wasn't thinking about my lines. I was just responding to the impetus. Do you know what I mean? So that it was completely automatic. It was a complete muscle memory.
And do you mean you were recording the other characters' lines and not your own, so that you can say your
Right.
own?
So I literally just recorded
really
the scene
cool.
like I'm reading a story in a book.
Yeah.
Even with the stage directions, because
Oh, yeah.
I record the stage directions because it helps with visualizing, and it helps with maintaining the timing and the rhythm. Sometimes it's too long.
Yeah.
And I have to figure that out as I'm going through a scene. And so just because of having to overcome that challenge, actually just became part of my process.
Yeah.
So that when I'm learning lines, I practice listening. So that once I get on set or once I get on stage, I'm not thinking about what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm just listening as the character, and then the lines that come out are coming out automatically. I'm just responding as the character, trying to get what I want. And so it's literally like I'm rehearsing by myself, and I'll come up with 2 or 3 different ways of approaching several lines, you know, just as my imagination has happened, and then I'll get in the scene with the other person, and they'll spin a line in a particular way that hits me a particular way that I will respond in a way that I never would have thought was possible, and it's better, just because I'm responding to the. I mean, if I'm talking about, I've been working with another actor who's really great.
Yes.
Like I found that with Titus, Welliver, over and over and over again.
On Bosch. You're talking
on
about
Bosch.
Bosch,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm getting chills because I just think about, there's this scene where, in the first season, because Titus is very extroverted and he's kind of frenetic. Yeah. He's as he gets older, he's calming down. But I've always been kind of a more still and very introverted. So I remember we had this scene where it was at a crime scene, and I had asked him to watch out for something, and when I showed up, I felt like he hadn't been doing his job, so I gave him shit about it. Titus was having trouble with the line because he was kind of starting to feed into my energy, and because I was kind of standing still, and he was trying to be still, and he said, "No, I need to move." And so we started the scene again, and I hit him with the line, and he came back with a level of rage. It almost took me out of character because I thought he was going to hit me. And because it shocked me so much, in order to stay in character, I had to ground myself in my body like I was rooted like a tree. Yeah. And it completely changed what I gave back to him.
Wow, yeah.
And it was like, because I had this split second that I thought he was going to hit me, and I got scared. And it was like, no, I can't, you know? Right. I know you're Achilles, but I'm Agamemnon. Fuck it. I got 25,000 men behind me. You know what I mean?
Now we got to find this moment. Did it make the final thing?
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
You have any idea where?
I know it was the first season. This is going to sound crazy, but I think it was in episode 4.
Okay, we're going to find it.
Would you mind telling the story of hurting your back?
I think I was 26, 27. My daughter was almost a year old. After my daughter was born, my wife at the time had always been the primary breadwinner. I mean, I'd always worked, but she just always made more money than I did. She went to Parsons School of Design, and she majored in jewelry design, and so she was either as a jeweler, as a designer, because even once we moved back to New York after graduate school, she actually got she ended up working in the corporate office at Avon Cosmetics. But when my daughter was born, suddenly I was like, I got to step it up. She can't work all the time. She can't work all the time. So I just kind of, being a college dropout, because I'd gone to music school and I dropped out. I really didn't have any kind of in office. I couldn't even type in office marketing skills. So I was delivering newspapers. I was delivering pizzas. I was at one point I was a singing waiter, and. So just as a life experience, coming from such a middle class, I don't want to say intellectual, but educated suburban background, just kind of having experience of being kind of a college dropout black, working class black man, kind of in the world with no support, was its own education. It's its own education. So I was just I got and I was also working out every day, so I got used to working on adrenaline, and I got used to working on sleep deprivation. It was just the way that I lived. So there was one day that I literally went from a double shift of waiting tables to a double shift of delivering newspapers it was just the way that it panned out. Yeah. To a double shift of delivering newspapers because it was the 100th anniversary of the Wall Street Journal. And I used to deliver very big, pretty heavy bundles to the financial district. I was living in Boston at the time. So I'd been up working for almost 24 hours. So I was fried. But I was also, when you're young and you're athletic and, you're just used to just going on will, you don't think anything of it until, it's time to sleep. And so I went to pick up this bundle, and I just picked it up the wrong way. And I felt something go in my back. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, that's fun, that hurt. That shouldn't be. And then I ignored it, figured I'd, sleep it off, work it out in the next few weeks, and then it'd be fine. Went home, went to bed. Each day it got a little worse, and about a week or two later, one day I woke up and I couldn't get out of bed. And I was laid up for 2 weeks, and then, so in the meantime, and I wasn't even making that much money. Even on a good week. I mean, a good week I was making if I made $400 in a week, that was man, I was killing it. So in those 2 weeks, I really started rethinking my approach to my life. Because when I first moved to Boston, I hooked up with a recording studio. To do a demo tape, and I really had to admit to myself that they were never going to get me a record deal, and they would just take it before a ride, and that it was kind of time to face reality. And this is one of those things where I don't know what possessed me, but I just thought I need to think outside the box. So I thought, well, I don't have any resources and I don't have any contacts, but I know that I can sing, and I know that I can act because I'd acted in college just for fun. So once my back started getting better, I just opened up the Boston Phoenix, which was their version of the Village Voice, and I just started looking at the local theater auditions. And I just started going on. I went on 2 musical theater auditions. They were busts because I'm a guy with a nice voice against people who were like Broadway level singers, and gospel singers. So then I started going on straight acting auditions and just getting cast in local non-equity theater in Boston. And then about a year later, I took an on-camera acting course at College Pickman, which was at the time the biggest casting director in Boston. And Patty Collins, who was my teacher, she really liked me, so she started bringing me in she just liked me as a student, and we got along as people. So she started bringing me in a lot for on-camera stuff. I mean, I got my SAG card through doing a couple of. I did an industrial commercial, and then I did my first on-camera job in scripted television it was one of Fox's very first shows that was shot in Boston. It was called, I get them confused with the Steven Seagal movie. One of them's Against the Law and one of them's Above the Law.
Yeah,
I think it was called Against the Law, and it was starring Michael O'Keefe, and he played he was playing a Boston attorney. Who he'd gone from a big law firm and now he was in private practice by himself, one man shop, and it was one scene. It was a flashback scene for a client of his who had been convicted of murder, and he was on his appeal, and the client was Keith David, who ironically I remember auditioning against in the original 7 Guitars, the worst audition I've ever given in my life, and that was several years later, but. And then I applied to Yale on a lark, which is its own story, and got in.
What I found fascinating was to hear that you were, around the early 2000s, not wanting to really do television. You wanted to do theater and movies.
Yeah.
But the Wire script was so good. Like, you knew this was going to be good.
I knew it was going to be great. I didn't know it was going to turn into a worldwide phenomenon that changed the culture of Western civilization. I mean, that was like, especially given how it played out while we were on, because we were publicized less than any show on HBO. We were kind of, after the first season, we didn't get any love. HBO it felt to me like HBO kind of dropped the ball on us. So we became that black show nobody's watching.
Right.
Yeah, and then we almost got canceled twice, and then in the 5th season, the last season, suddenly. Everybody in Hollywood started talking about it.
Yeah.
And over a couple of years before that, I started hearing that this is all through word of mouth. Right. It was starting becoming big in like Sweden. It was starting becoming big in the UK. Before, and I was like, really? In the 5th season, suddenly everybody was talking about it. When I auditioned for The Wire, I auditioned for Bunk 3 times. Now my 3rd audition, David Simon and Ed Burns were in the room. And David asked me to read Bubbles on the spot. He just said, you know what, let me, I want you to try reading Bubbles. So, so I went out and I came back and I read Bubbles cold. And I know the reason he asked me to do that was because in the last 2 years, he had just seen me play 2 drug addicts in a row. So I played Marvin in The Corner, which was for him and Ed, which he'd cast me in, and then I played Mobay / Detective Basil on Oz, where I became a heroin addict. So, as a matter of fact, the last time I had seen David before my audition for The Wire was a year earlier. He had come to visit Tom Fontana on the set of Oz, and I ran into him. So, and I ended up being second choice for Bubbles. So if Andre Royal had said no, I would have been cast as Bubbles.
So you didn't even read for Daniels then?
No, I mean, Daniels was my 4th audition for that show. So, and the 3rd role I auditioned for. And that was after they'd gone through a bunch of names, and because David and Ed were just real particular about finding the right actor, not about playing the star in the game, which is what they were trying to do with that role. I didn't know any of this at the time. I just knew they wouldn't see me. And so then 2 weeks after I found out that somebody else had taken the role of Bubbles, now we know it's Andre Royal, I got a call to audition for Daniels. And then, it's funny, because one of the things, there was when I finished my audition, I wanted to go on tape with Alexa Fogel for Daniels. And I did the 2 scenes that I had, and she said, okay, now let's do the monologue. And I said, what monologue? She said, well, there's a monologue. And I said, I didn't get it. She said, well, here. She found it. She said, here it is. Go out, look at it, and come back. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I go out, I look at it. I'm like, it is what it is. Yeah. So I went back. I read it, did the best I could, and then I forgot about it. And then I called my agent maybe a week or 2 later. It wasn't more than 2 weeks. It was like a week later to check on it. And he said they were going to pass, that they were still looking for names. And he named a couple of names. He said, it'd make you feel better. I was like, it doesn't make me feel better, but okay. And then I forgot about it. And about 2 weeks after that, I was on the set of 100 Center Street doing a guest day player role. And I remember I was late to go visit a school because my daughter was going into high school. And so we were like checking out school. So we were going to like a conference with the faculty. And I get a beeper. This is how long ago it was. I had beepers. I got a beep from my agent. So I go to pay phone and I'm like, Steve, what is it? I'm late and I got to catch a train and find this place. He said, The Wire. You got it. And I was like, what? He said, yeah. I said, well, which role?
Because you don't even know.
I had no idea. No, I said, which role? He said, Lieutenant Daniels. I said, Lieutenant Daniels? He said, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So you just never know. Yeah.
Just never know.
And then that changed. Then after Daniels, it was like the reason I got Broyles and Fringe was because of Daniels.
Right. And this is
And I know that because of the way the audition process went down. I mean, I do believe that Alexa was a champion of mine by that point, which is funny because she didn't want to.
That's what Michael K. Williams says too.
Yeah, she did. It's funny because she didn't want to see me for Oz. Because the last time she had seen me was for a guest spot on NYPD Blue, I think 2 years earlier, and it was the second worst audition I've ever given in my life. I just bombed.
We need to just say that the unsung heroes that are not talked about are these casting people. And some of these casting people, like if we really love these things and we really love you, we have to raise them up. Like this woman keeps coming up when I talk to people.
Alexa?
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, like this is just
she's
like
a
one
smart. When it comes, I mean, granted, like she thought I was just after that bad audition, and that's happened to me. That's the second time that's happened to me twice in my career where I bombed an audition for a casting director that I had loved me, and then they just like didn't call me for years.
But then you got back in their face.
But then I got yeah.
What do you need from a director? You yourself, as an actor.
First of all, they got to be good. And when I say, I mean,
What does that mean?
Well,
that
because
means something different to everybody.
I've worked with some bad directors, particularly in television, and particularly on network television, who get in my way. So I need them to stay out of my way. And when I say good, I mean they need to understand so many. I feel like, especially executives and even a lot of cast directors really don't understand what it is that we do. Really don't understand acting. Do you know what I mean? Which is why you see when I look at the difference between so much of American television and British television, first of all, just in the way that people look. There's so much typing and generic prettiness, and so many people that are clearly models who want to be actors and went to LA and took some classes and then they got cast. So an actor a director that understands acting, so that if they give me a note, it's going to help. It's not going to get in my way. I mean, there was a director who I hated, and they loved him on Fringe, so they had him back multiple times, and it just drove me nuts. He would give me directions like it needs more intensity. What that really means is I can't see what you're doing, so you must not be doing anything. I'm like, dude. So he was constantly pushing me to overact. That I cannot stand. I mean, here's a perfect example. There was an episode in Fringe where it was an alternate universe. So one of the things that we were distinguishing with all the characters, but my character in particular, is that in the main universe, my career always came first. In the alternate universe, my family came first. So in the alternate universe, I'm still married. So being someone who, you reach a certain age and you understand something about relationship. So there was a situation where I had, kind of the evil genius of the universe was basically blackmailing me with a treatment for a terminal illness that my son had, and in return I was basically betraying my country. I was betraying the world, and so and that's something that like the other Broyles would never do. And so there's a scene that I come from a funeral of one of my guys who's died because of something that I've done. I mean, I didn't mean for it to happen, but it's died because of some way that I betrayed him. And when I come in from the funeral, my wife says, "How are you?" And I say, "Okay." And what I do is I go to look at the mail. I don't look at her, and I'm not looking at her. And the director, his immediate direction was, "Lance, it's not about the mail. I want to see your eyes. I want to see your eyes." I mean, dude, I'm playing avoiding her eyes because we are so in sync. You know, when you're in a relationship with somebody
You don't wanna look at them,
you don't
yeah.
want to look at their eyes, because the first thing they're going to see is something's wrong, and they're going to ask you what's wrong, and then you got to start lying, and then you know. So what you want to do is you want to, you know, I'm okay, fine. So that's what I was playing, but he couldn't see that that's what I was playing. So it's that kind of stuff that drives me nuts.
Tell me what you do. What do you do in a situation like that?
You do the best you can. It depends on the actor. I unfortunately caved in, so I gave him what he wanted in that situation.
There's nothing else you could really do. I mean, you can't go against it. Right?
Some actors do. Some actors do. You know, and often those are the people. It's funny you say that, because in studying great, it's interesting. I think that being a star and being a great actor are different skill sets, and sometimes they dovetail. But often I find that the people that are huge stars are people that are really, really, really good at getting their way. And if I even like Meryl Streep is a great example. Now, when I started reading kind of her history of her role, like for example, in Kramer versus Kramer, her scene on the witness stand was written completely differently. But she's like, my character wouldn't do that. She fought with the director. I mean, granted, like she was kind of the wonderkind out of Yale that everybody in the industry was talking about. But by the same token, it's Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah, and she wasn't Meryl.
She wasn't Meryl yet. This wasn't Meryl yet. She'd been out of drama school maybe 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And she got them to let her rewrite her monologue on the stand, and yet she won an Academy Award. For Sophie's Choice, I mean, they shot some of that stuff on location in Poland, because she said, we need that for the realism. They're like, we don't have the budget. Somehow she got them to do it. So, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like a fine line, right?
It is a
like
fine line.
you got to like push it if you can.
Now, there have been times when I fought back, and that is, you know, I mean, I did a film called I Dreamed of Africa, and the director, I mean, from the beginning, I felt like the director's take on the character was racist. So, I mean, one of the things he said to me, first of all, it was like Kim Basinger's big coming out movie after she won the Academy Award.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so, and it was a big break for me. I played her main servant. He's kind of the guy who's there when she and her kids. It's based on Cookie Gallman, who's a real person from Italy.
Right.
So one of the first things the director said to me was, Lance, you know, I want to talk to you because your role is very important because you represent Africa. And I'm like, wow. So first of all, do you think a servant with a handful of lines represents Africa?
Right.
Second of all, you think I'm stupid because you're saying this to me like it's a huge compliment.
Right.
Because I'm not a big star. So I'm like, so I was like, just keep my head down and keep trying to do my job. And at one point, there was a scene where they had the kitchen was an open air kitchen. So it was like kind of just outside the house. Yeah. There was a huge garden patch out in front of the kitchen. So they had a scene where an elephant comes and raids the garden patch. And they wanted her to run, yelling at the elephant. Well, anybody who's you know, I studied a little bit about, you know, so I knew how dangerous elephants were.
Right.
So he wanted me out in the kitchen when she comes doing it. I said, what do you want me doing? He just be there. I'm like, just be there. Well, I mean, I have to, I'm a person and having a character who's like always, you know, we're never just there somewhere. We're always doing, even if it's just a rest. Right. Do you know what I mean? So so I was like, I have to find something to do. And he says, when she comes out, he wanted Vincent Perez, who was playing her husband, to run out and stop her. And I said, well, I would stop her. I mean, I'm a native Kenyan. Yeah. I know how dangerous, and you've already established that part of my relationship with her is being very protective. So the first thing I would do is I would run and try to stop her. He said, well, you can't because we have to have Vincent do it. I said, well, then it doesn't make sense for me to be in the scene. Well, you just have to be there. I was livid, and I stormed off, and I'm standing there, and I don't know why, but my head just kept thinking, I can't let this happen to me. I can't let this happen to me. I can't let this happen to me. And miraculously, the script supervisor came up to me and said, Hugh has changed his mind. He thinks you're right. Wow. And I said, great. So I left. And then I found out later from one of the makeup people who I was actually dating at the time. She came up to me and later said that after I stormed off, the script supervisor actually stepped up for me and said, Hugh, he's right.
I want to bring you back to 2006, and I want to talk about 7 Guitars.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I want to know where you were in your acting life walking into that production?
Where I was in my career was kind of the, I don't want to say the height, but a great deal of frustration. I just wasn't getting seen for films. And so part of what's ironic about my doing that play is that I did it for all the wrong reasons. So I had just moved from New York to Los Angeles the year before. The Wire was not getting any attention in the industry. We were in 2006 when I did 7 Guitars. I believe that was between seasons 4 and 5. You know, my agent at the time, how he couched it was as another way of getting seen for film. People seeing me in a different way. Yeah. And so, you know, I'm coming from Los Angeles to an off-Broadway show, so I'm not making any money. The rehearsal schedule was ridiculous because we only had 2 weeks of rehearsal before we went into 2.5 weeks of rehearsal before we went into previews. And I was playing Floyd, the lead. So, I mean, it's the only time in my career that I've actually been worried about my lines. It's the only time in my career that I've completely gone up on stage. It was rough.
For anybody who doesn't know what going up means, it means forgetting your lines.
Yeah,
I mean, some people
might know.
And
when I went up, I literally was in the middle of a monologue. It was the beginning of in the second act. Floyd comes on stage with Canewell in a rant about having been arrested, and literally in the middle, almost I think at least the two our girlfriends are on stage. And so we come on, and I'm ranting and raving, and literally in the middle of the rant, in the middle of a sentence, I just completely went up. I just forgot where I was. It was horrifying, and I literally even backed up and started the sentence again. Backed up, literally
being in the same spot again.
And then I forgot it. Yeah, and then I looked at the other actors, and they had terror in their eyes because they were like, "This is not a situation where we can help you because it's not in the middle of a conversation." Right. And I literally just kind of turned to the audience and said, "I'm sorry." And it's so weird because I still, as horrifying as that moment was, you'd think I'd remember what happened after that, but I don't remember how I got back on track. Yeah.
How was Ruben a taskmaster? Like what
well,
was
it's just he could be very domineering, and he was just, when it came to being off book, he I'm trying to remember because he had a phrase that he would use. You got to be more in that book. You got to be more in that book. And I don't even know if I'm saying it right. Yeah, but
because he's an actor, so that means there's an actor directing a play.
He's not just an actor directing a play. He's an actor directing a play that the original Broadway production was his first Tony Award as an actor.
Right. That's right.
As a matter of
that's right. He won the Tony for that.
He won a Tony Award for Canewell.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if it was after that or around that time, he became the preeminent expert on August Wilson.
He is he's probably the greatest August Wilson director of the last 20 years.
Right. So
he is the guy.
So, and we did you know that at the time?
I did not know that at the time. Okay. I knew, what I did know was that he had won.
Yeah. You're right.
I had met him once, ironically. No, I think I met him twice, but the first time I didn't remember him being in the room because I auditioned for the HBO film version of Lackawanna Blues, which was his, for the people who don't know, which was his one-man show that he wrote, his autobiography of his life. Yeah, at the Public. Yeah. And so, and I didn't get the role. And so in between seasons 3 and 4 of The Wire, they took so long to decide whether or not we were going to be picked up that we were all auditioning for other pilots in second position. And so I was sitting outside waiting to go into an audition for, it's funny because I remember it was a pilot about the first woman president. It was why can't I remember her name? From she used to be married to Jeff Goldblum, tall.
Yeah, Gina Davis.
Gina Davis. And ironically, Harry Lennox is a buddy of mine, ended up getting that role. I mean, the show didn't last, but anyway.
Harry Lennox was on the show.
Oh, was
on my
he?
show, yes.
Oh, Harry's great. Harry's great.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Ruben was sitting next to me, and he wasn't sitting next to me. He came out of the audition, and I was waiting. And as he came out, the waiting room's right in front of the elevators. He pushes the elevator button. He's waiting, and he looks at me, and he walks up to me, and he says, "Lance, I just want you to know you gave a great audition for Lackawanna Blues. I really wanted to cast you, but I mean, just so you know, there were people that I wrote roles for that I couldn't get cast."
Wow.
So fast forward a year later,
Yeah.
when I auditioned for 7 Guitars, the public I think the producers were hesitant to hire me because I hadn't done theater in so long, and they were concerned that my voice wasn't going to be strong enough. And Ruben was really adamant about having me playing Floyd, the lead.
What you said to me when you were leaving last time was the hardest production. These are not the words, but the best.
Oh, it's
production.
absolutely the best production I've ever been a part of.
Yeah.
In terms of the way it was conceived, in terms of kind of the way actors were directed, in terms of actually the acting.
Yeah.
Of actually kind of and putting putting things on its feet in such a way that that the story comes alive on stage. Yeah. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Ruben is a genius. He's a freaking genius. Yeah. And he's a hard ass. I mean, he could be a real. I mean, he's got an enormous ego, and he can be kind of a bully. Yeah. And he's got a mean streak, and he's also like. Every time I see him now, it's like family. I mean, I mean, everything I just said about him, like he drove me nuts, and there were times when I hated him, and I adore the guy. I mean, I know it doesn't make any sense, but I love him, and I have so much admiration and respect for his commitment to the work and how good he is.
Is there anything in your training or something that you used to apply to your work when you were young that you totally have disregarded now? And I'm asking this because there are people that might be in this transition phase from like they're working a lot and they're holding on to certain things that are not useful anymore.
Well, the only thing, I wouldn't say that it's part of my training, but it was definitely part of my practice. And it was something that I kind of developed on my own. For me, just sitting down to try to learn lines willy-nilly. Like my brain just doesn't want to just sit and focus. Mm-hmm. So it needs, it's got to be goal-oriented. So one of the ways that I do that is by using numbers. So, when I was in drama school, and then this kind of bore out for many years after I got out of school, I would feel like I would have to go through a scene slowly and meticulously at least 100 times before I was ready to perform. And so that was kind of my benchmark. You have to get through it 100 times. Yeah. And if it was like only 78, then I'd be in my head. I'd be, oh shoot, man, I didn't have enough time. But it was that kind of thing.
It's like literally a number game that was holding you up. So are you saying that you don't think that way anymore?
Well, here's where, believe it or not, where it changed. It changed in Fringe, because even though The Wire wasn't that different from other shows in that. They were always ahead at the beginning of the season, and the closer we got to the end of the season, the more, the less lead time you had. But I still usually managed to get in my 100, my 100 passes. Do you know what I mean? But on Fringe, they just changed the script. There was so much rewriting, even from the beginning. There were so many reshoots from the very beginning. I mean, it drove me nuts. It was, and for somebody who's such a perfectionist, just part of my psychology as an actor. It's just part of my psychology, but it drove me nuts. And the further along we got in the season, the less it felt like I could do my work well. On top of which, there was one. The top two leads didn't get along at all on that show, and there was one actor in particular who was just a nightmare to work with. I mean, it was like the series from hell for me. So, in addition to constantly being worried about not having time to, I mean, not constantly. It was hit or miss depending on the week and how much rewriting there was, because very often I would have these long exposition monologues, and then on top of it, to have somebody who was just kind of an ass, so it's hard to focus just trying to do your work. Like your focus is on like being the best that you can be, and their focus is on getting as much attention as they can get all the time. So, and I ran into that a little bit with one person on The Wire, but still, I mean, it was like night and day. It was like night and day. So by the time I finished Fringe, I mean, it had really, in a lot of ways, it had destroyed my work ethic. It had destroyed my self-confidence. It took me about a year to get all that back. And then but you know, something interesting happened though. There's something about the way that I approach my work that's looser. So I still kind of map it, and now I do it in time. I still use numbers. I still do it with time, rather than with.
It's like an OCD thing. Sounds like
rather than
a little bit.
Maybe I don't know
numbers, but yeah. I know what you mean though. Like you feel like you have to like
I have to figure out a way to map, especially if I'm pressed for time. Yeah. I have to figure out a way to map out just learning the words. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And getting into the point where it's muscle memory, because for me that's where you can really start doing the work when you're not thinking about your lines at all.
Right. And it sounds like sometimes when something is that bad of an experience, where it upends your process, it actually can be a good thing, because you start to learn that there are some things you can function even in the worst.
Yes, yeah. Well, sometimes yeah. I mean, but the thing. No, I'll go back to yes. Yeah. The other thing I started to realize is that I needed to let go of the fear of forgetting my lines, and just whatever time I had, just map out a plan and just make sure I did the plan, and then just trust that my subconscious would do the rest.
Right. I guess when you do go up on lines, forever you have this post-traumatic stress about it.
Well, it depends on where it is. And it depends on how it happens. Yeah. Like when you do it on stage, the way it happened to me, because literally it had never happened to me before ever. Yeah. I mean, I tripped on lines before, but I'd never forgotten my lines. Yeah. That was that's kind of a post-traumatic stress thing. Yeah. You know, there's still a part of me that's a little afraid of going back on stage because of that. Right. But with television, first of all, television and film, one of the things I realized is that because I was such a perfectionist, the notion that I'd be seen as somebody who would like forget a line, I was just like, everybody thought, oh, he's not a perfect. It was like this horrific that I'm the guy that always knows his lines, always. So the notion that I would show up like forgetting a line just terrified me. And I realized that sometimes you just don't remember the line. You say, oh shit, I'm sorry, what's the line? Okay, let me start it. And now I'm just much more loose about it. Yeah. Yeah. And in some ways, I feel like my work, ironically, is I haven't, you know, in terms of actually focusing in on a character when I'm actually acting, I don't feel like I've lost any intensity. But because my process is looser and I'm more relaxed, in some ways I feel like my work is deeper.
Is there some role or some type of role that you haven't been able to do yet that you would like to do, or always have this desire to do?
Believe it or not, I want to play a regular, well-meaning guy who's kind of a loser. because I always my characters, even though I've been very fortunate to play very, very, very different kinds of roles, the common theme is that they tend to be very intense. Right. And I want to do just a guy who's just kind of a schlub, because I never get to do that.
That's such an interesting. That's so cool. Lance Reddick, thank you so much for this.
Thank you. I feel like I just rambled and I didn't answer enough questions.
Are you nuts? This is what the show is all about. This is what we want. This is what we want. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.